we have a lot of pain ahead of us still. I hope that the pain will drive a change that makes everything better. We don't have red states and blue states. We just have states. Americans who have a net worth of $2 million or more, 53% of those Americans are leaving the country.
A CIA operation called Operation Often. CIA operatives consulted and recruited a wide array of individuals such as fortune tellers, palm readers, clairvoyants, astrologers, mediums, psychics, demonologists, witches, warlocks, and Satanists.
It makes complete sense to me as a CIA officer that they would invest in a way of weaponizing the limited resources of individuals who may already be in touch with the inner mind. Because if you can gain that advantage, then you have all of those resources before your enemies, your current enemies have them, and also before your future enemies have them. I am finding that the more I engage with highly successful, highly productive, high achievers, the more they are asking that to stand in front of the threat and protect your loved ones or protect yourself. The paternal instinct is actually to attack the threat. When CIA and DOD did military studies, combative studies to see which of these instincts was better, paternal instinct won out significant, almost 4-1. There's plenty of factual negative history that has come to light in the public sphere about CIA. So it's really important to me to be positive. And it's been such a struggle personally because I'm running out of positive things to say. There's plenty of truth, but it's hard to be optimistic unless you are leaning into faith. The more I engage with highly successful, highly productive, high achievers, the more they are asking that spiritual question, the more they are exploring, how do I connect with an energy source that is a completely different vibration, that is something more true, something more organic. So I have to say this because, and I've been holding my tongue for however long we've been sitting here, right? I don't know if it's just you or if it's your energy or your intention or whoever the architect was of this space.
We're back with CIA spy Andrew Bustamante because I wanted to ask him, what do you see when you look out at the world? And what he sees from his unique vantage point is that we're in for a lot of pain and in for a lot of chaos. But if you have faith, there's a possible way through, and that way through involves solving this problem at a different level of consciousness that it was created. So we talk about the role of faith in this chaotic world and what's practical. What's the practical, pragmatic way that you can protect yourself, your family? How can we come together as a nation? What are some of the challenges of CIA operations like Operation Often, where they recruited actively warlocks, Satanists, black magic practitioners, trying to weaponize everything, trying to weigh and measure everything, and how people of wealth in the United States are at a level of 53% getting secondary visas and having plans to leave our country. But I think all of us feel that this isn't the time to leave. It's the time to double down and make this country as beautiful as it was once dreamed it could be. He also just came out with a book, Shadow Cell, which we spoke about the story of on our previous podcast. So make sure you check that out and check out the book. And without further ado, CIA spy Andrew Bustamante. Andrew, good to have you back, brother.
It's good to be back, man.
So from your perspective, you have a unique vantage point as a former CIA operative. When you look out at the world right now, what are you seeing through your eyes?
It's not a happy story. It's not a good place to start. It's the reason I'm not invited to parties, really, man, because we have a lot of pain ahead of us still. Mm-hmm. And I hope that the pain will drive a change that makes everything better. But that's not what history proves more often than not. So what I'm talking about is we're under fiscal pain. We're under social pain. We're under international pain. There's competition everywhere. And you see not just in the United States, but in the whole world that strength is being met with strength. And there's just more and more fight everywhere. And that doesn't de-escalate conflict. That only exacerbates conflict. And the people who really feel conflict are not the decision makers. It's the people at the bottom of the totem pole.
Mm. So when you're looking at the possible risk vectors of this increasing conflict, like what are you seeing? You know, what is some of this, and we'll all take a deep breath here with you. But I think it's important to have eyes open to what might be ahead of us.
So I think there's a few different vectors that we should look at. The first vector I would look at is really our daily lives. And what does the world have to do with impact to our daily lives? And when you're an American, particularly, and you're looking at the daily life of an American, it's really just about keeping your family safe, keeping yourself safe, and part of that safety is finance, keeping money in your pocket, money in the bank, keeping a roof over your head, right? Even at that basic level, everything is threatened. And it's threatened because one of the things that's really becoming apparent to us in the last 18 months is that the face of what threatens American security is changing. It's been changing since the 1980s, but when you look at the killing of Charlie Kirk, you look at the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, you look at the killing of Brian Thompson, United Healthcare CEO, in November of 2024, you see a very chilling consistency with what FBI investigators are reporting in their annual criminal reports. You're seeing that the majority of fatality, lethal killings are coming from men under the age of 30 who are intelligent and unemployed. That's the new face of danger, right? Men under the age of 30 who are very intelligent and who are unemployed. Pair that up with what we're seeing economically, with increasing unemployment and with this continual kind of press towards political division. You're seeing that is going to continue to encourage what are very intelligent people to reach the wrong conclusion that violence is going to be a solution. And that's what's dangerous about intelligent people. Really intelligent people live in their own heads, and they create these echo chambers in their own minds about what is actually happening because they've been ostracized or they feel like outsiders among the more average intelligence people. It's why high success people are very smart. It's also why very unsuccessful people are oftentimes very smart. They live in this echo chamber that's not real.
It seems like there's been pressure to capitalize leverage on the fomentation of this kind of division and of this labeling and of this dehumanization. I mean, this is classic propaganda for any war. You start calling the enemy names, dehumanizing them, they're cockroaches, they're rats, they're whatever else it is, or Nazis, fascists, whatever you want to do. Now, of course, that means something similar to one of these dehumanized terms. You start using these terms, and then actually people coming from a patriotic impulse will say, oh, well, I have to do something. Right? So it seems like this game that's been played, which was designed for short-term, finite, game success, which is maybe we win the next election cycle because we disparage and radicalize the other side. And both sides do this. Nobody is innocent from this kind of radicalization. This is ultimately leading to a situation like we have now, right?
You're exactly right. And the way that you describe it is exactly on point. There's this whirlpool effect that is being amplified. It starts at a political level because one side is dehumanizing the other side, creating labels, creating titles that then get repeated by the people who are farthest leaning in whatever political direction that is, the far left, the far right. That's not the problem. The problem is when that makes it into the home. The problem is when that makes it onto social media and everybody has access to social media. So now this show, because politics is a show, the show that's happening at the top becomes amplified and magnified in the home, in the school, and at the level of students. And then now you've got these students who are 10, 12 years old, public school, private school, doesn't matter, but they're living in an environment where the students far outnumber the adults. So where are they getting their ideas from? They're getting their ideas from other students. And as those students mature, they're maturing among a peer group that's being just as radicalized as the parents of those peer groups. then you can just start to see. That's why we have what we call red states and blue states. We don't have red states and blue states. We just have states. And the states are comprised of people, and the people may have their political opinion one way or the other. But what's fascinating is the loudest voices are the farthest extremes. And you have this silent majority in the middle that understands they're not as crazy as the two extremes, but they also understand they can't really speak up. They're afraid to say what they think, because what if they're ostracized?
Right.
What if they're marginalized? What if they lose their job? I just saw a report today that there's a new bill in Congress that makes it so that you could have your passport taken away from you if you're deemed to be a supporter of a organization or a group that is deemed anti-American. Primarily, if you're supporting terrorist groups or affiliated with any kind of terrorist support, that's a loose label, right? Terrorism, by definition, is a loose label. And then anti-American is a loose label. So who's going to determine whether or not you're falling under that rubric?
Well, that's particularly frightening because depending on who's in power at that current time, the other side, they've been saying that the other side is anti-American all the time.
Yeah.
So whoever's in power, that's going to switch back and forth. And there's just going to be the persecution of political rivals and their support groups, unless we recognize that this game is ultimately self-defeating. That if we continue to play this game of win-lose metrics and zero-sum politics, we're going to erode our entire country.
The foundation that we spent so much time building, the foundation that made the wealthiest, freest country in the world. And when we talk about things reaching into the home, I'm not just talking about politics, and I don't want people to oversimplify it into thinking that I'm talking about politics. As the changing face of threat has happened from the 80s, when we were all afraid of gang violence, and what we could see were like hoodlums wearing, muscle shirts, wearing some sort of gang-affiliated memorabilia. That's what we were afraid of in the 80s. And then in the 90s, we were afraid of domestic terrorists. And then in the early 2000s, we were afraid of foreign terrorists, right? If they had brown skin and a long beard and a turban, we were afraid of them. Well, now what we're seeing is empirically, the most dangerous people might actually look like your neighbor. They might be the 22-year-old, quiet, shy, high-achieving student that lives right next door, or even in the bedroom next to your bedroom. When the federal government changes their policy to meet the rising threat, they cracked down on gang violence in the 1980s. They started to create platforms that would track your phone, track your mail. They started to become very invasive when it was domestic terrorism in the 90s. When it became international terrorism, that's when the Patriot Act came, and they started scrubbing metadata from everybody. So the government reaches deeper and deeper into our daily lives, into our privacy, into our businesses, into our families, into our living rooms to try to prevent against the rising threat. Well, if the rising threat becomes middle American guys, what does that mean for the changing policy that's going to meet that threat?
It seems like, they're going to use this cause to reach even deeper into the surveillance state.
Yes.
Where Big Brother is going to become not a reality TV show, it's going to become reality.
Right. And what's fascinating about that is we're not the first surveillance state. And when you look at the case studies of economic success and security for the surveillance states that do exist, they're very good news stories. They're good case studies. When you look at UAE and you look at Saudi Arabia and you look at China, you're seeing countries that are on the economic rise that has paralleled their increased surveillance activity of their own people. So if the United States wants to see an economic comeback, the case studies are showing that there's a case for increased surveillance.
So these are examples of, economic thriving, but then there's also,
socially oppressed.
Exactly. There's a fundamental violation of what makes America the land of the free and the home of the brave, is that we actually have a certain sense of privacy where we're allowed to conduct our own lives without somebody overseeing it, especially when there's rules in place where you can claim somebody as an enemy of America, depending on whether you're blue or red. That's going to change according to that. I mean, we're setting ourselves up for a really challenging situation. In particular, one difference that I would say without even having, admittedly having very little knowledge of geopolitics and the international implementation of these surveillance states, it seems like there's a stronger nationalistic kind of impulse. Like those countries are less divided, but we're deeply, deeply divided. So you implement a surveillance state with power that's going through extreme division, and then you get a real problem. And it may not lead to these positive case studies. It may lead to actually complete erosion.
And that is why I started this conversation by saying it's going to be a difficult road ahead, because the questions that we all have to ask ourselves is, how much are we willing to deviate from the American ideal? Are we willing to support or accept politicians who are willing to support and vote for increased surveillance activity in the best interest of protecting the average citizen? Or are we going to resist that movement for security and accept the consequences of what might be increased violence until we can figure our way through it? It's one of those catch-22s where both options, from where we sit today, both options don't look good. And unfortunately, the easiest way to fix where we're going would be to have changed our decisions from the past.
Totally.
But we can't do that. So we have to deal with what we have today. Let me just give you an example of another case study that leads to my consternation, right? France. Even as you and I sit here today, France, the streets of Paris are on fire because the French prime minister called an emergency meeting of parliament on the 8th of September. And at that emergency meeting, the prime minister told the parliament that the fiscal outlook for France is bad. They're 114% in debt over their GDP. So they owe 14% more every year than they actually produce as GDP. And the prime minister was talking to parliament and said, the responsible thing for us to do is to cut our budget, just like any citizen would do, and get ourselves back into a place where our debt and our income are more tenable. The parliament rejected his vote, rejected his idea to change the budget. And then they had a second immediate vote where the parliament voted no confidence in the prime minister and kicked the prime minister out of his seat. He is the third prime minister to have been booted in the last year in France alone. When the president of France then appointed a new prime minister 4 days later, that new prime minister didn't ask parliament anything. He just decided, we will cut the budget. We will cut it $50 billion. And then protests immediately rose. And people decided that the best way to fight the decision that came from their parliament and their new prime minister is to actually destroy businesses and burn cars in the streets. France is one of the largest economies in Europe. Germany and France are the top two largest economies in Europe, one of the oldest countries and the oldest democracies that are out there. In many ways, the United States takes its direction off of where Europe is going. That's why you see Europe kind of leading the way to renewable energies, and Europe leading the way to privacy, and Europe leading the way to anti-monopoly. The United States kind of follows that path, even though we go back and forth between, left and right politics. Well, if France's people are making these actions and making these decisions because they're 114% behind, what's the United States going to do? We are 119% in debt over what we actually generate in GDP. So we're in a worse financial situation, but we're not having those questions about whether or not we should cut our budget.
Yeah, there's a great long-term vision and courage that it takes to make these right fiscal decisions as the Fed. You have to be willing to say, all right, we're going to suffer now so that we can prosper later. But we seem to be in this constant, perpetual failing of that classic marshmallow test where they give a child, a marshmallow and they say, if you eat this marshmallow, you can have the marshmallow. If you wait 5 minutes, I'll give you more marshmallows. And everybody in politics and our government is like, let's eat the fucking marshmallow. Let's win the next election. Blah, blah, blah. It's kind of wild that we're in this because we're not having a long-term vision, a shared vision of our own country. I mean, that's what we really need. We need to come together with a shared vision and have people speaking truth to us so that we can rally behind it and say, like, these will be tough times. We need to come together and actually change the course that we've taken. And we're seeing I'm seeing at least a lot of doubling down, but I'm also seeing a lot of transformation as well. I'm seeing a lot of people go, whoa, wait a minute. We've gone too far. I think the Charlie Kirk assassination was a real wake-up call for that. I mean, I think some people, many people are saying like, wow, we've taken this too far. Like we've gone way too far in this. And whether you agree with his premises or you agree with his political stance, the radicalization that was underneath the person who pulled the trigger. Now, of course, there's some questions about that as well. And I'd love to get your kind of expert opinion about that shot that was taken. And I mean, obviously this is just wild speculation, of course, at that point, but undeniably there's been this fomentation of radicalization, dehumanization that some people at least are waking up to, and waking up to the energies behind that, the people who are celebrating the slaying of a man in front of his children and his wife, in front of the world.
Absolutely. And to your point about the awakening and people identifying the energies behind it. In December of 2004, I think it was December 4th, 2004, you had Brian Thompson, the United Healthcare CEO, who was killed in cold blood in Manhattan by Luigi Mangione. Now we have Charlie Kirk, another civilian about the same age, who strangely also has 2 children, just like Brian Thompson, who was also happily married, just like Brian Thompson, who's killed in Utah. Both are acts by similar killers. Both are acts that are most likely politically motivated in some way because they wanted some kind of policy change, some kind of political change, right? But the reactions from Americans are totally different. After Luigi Mangione killed Brian Thompson, you actually saw a surgence of support for Mangione's actions, that killing the healthcare CEO was somehow valid or warranted. And people started talking, and there's still support for Mangione. There's a nonprofit that's collecting money for his defense because they believe that some people believe that he brought proper oversight to what was an abuse by the healthcare system. The energy, the time that went between that event and this event with Charlie Kirk, I think really did transform more and more Americans' perspectives to say, killing a person is not okay. Killing somebody that you disagree with because of what they say or what they stand for is not okay. Brian Thompson was a CEO. He was appointed to that position by other people. He was not an influencer. He was not known by anybody else. And arguably, what Mangione was looking for that day wasn't even Brian Thompson. He was looking for any investor, any leader, anybody related to the top of United Healthcare, right? Whereas we know for a fact that when Tyler Robinson went to that Utah event, he was looking for Charlie Kirk. He was looking for that target.
Sure.
So there's differences and similarities that I think absolutely back up your idea that there's almost like a groundswell of self-reflection. And we're all saying, is this what we want to be? Mm-hmm. Is this what we want to be as a people, as a country, as individuals that create the total population?
During my 11-year tenure with Onnit, we created a lot of revolutionary formulas, none more revolutionary than our flagship Alpha Brain. It's a product that I take every single day, still to this day. And then after I sold Onnit in 2021, I came across a particular ingredient. It's a metabolite of caffeine, which means that it's something that the body naturally breaks caffeine down into. And it's called paraxanthine. And then I found that ingredient and I said, this is doing a lot of what I wish caffeine would do, but it's not having the negative effects that I experience with caffeine. It's making me feel more alive, more energized, more clear in my mind, but it's also not sending me down that caffeine roller coaster. And then I said, what if we surrounded this with the best natural ingredients to create a really revolutionary formula, and we did it. And so I created a new company called Correct with a K, housed on correct.life, called Correct Energy. And it's absolutely as much of a revolution as Alpha Brain ever was. Alpha Brain worked on the acetylcholine neurotransmitter designed to give you more focus, and this works on the dopamine pathway, which is really like the go mechanism for the body. So whether you're working out, working hard, writing, anything that you're doing, playing with your kids, Correct Energy is going to be an absolute revolution in how you're able to interact with life with the vim and vigor and passion that you know is truly you. One of the things about this product is it just feels like you have more of you available. It doesn't change who you are. It doesn't change your mindset. It just gives you more of the best of yourself. So if you're interested, check it out at correct.life. If you're enjoying this conversation, make sure to like and subscribe. This Aubrey Marcus podcast is itself a grassroots movement, and it depends on you, the community of listeners, so that this can reach as many people as possible. So we greatly appreciate your support. And now enjoy the rest of the conversation. You know, you look at Hollywood and you see the glorification of vigilantism, right? The state, they have their hands tied. They can't do what's really needed. What you really need is someone like Denzel Washington, the equalizer, to come in. And the movies paint a picture where it's like, yeah, of course, Denzel, like, carry out what you're going to do, but in reality, the dangers, why they're always being chased and tracked by the Fed or by whoever else, is that this ideology, yes, if you have perfect clarity, there may be a justification. Now that depends on your religious and moral ideas about the use of violence, but it requires a perfect clarity. The problem is that nobody has perfect clarity. Perfect clarity is reserved for God, right? Like, God is omniscient, all-seeing. We have a limited single perspective. We're never going to see the whole picture. So the idea that a human being can carry out God's justice is a fundamentally flawed idea. And occasionally, maybe they may be somewhat justified, but more often than not, it's a much higher likelihood that they're going to be making their decision based upon partial or impaired ideas.
Yeah. I had this fantastic mentor when I was at CIA who taught me a lesson about dominoes. And he used to always carry 4 dominoes, 2 stacked one way and 2 stacked the opposite way, that would sit on his desk. And he would use these dominoes to kind of explain the concept of cause and effect for all intents and purposes. But he would line these dominoes up and he would say that once one domino in the row is knocked over, it's actually the energy from that first domino that knocks over the second. And then it's the energy from the first and second domino that knock over the third. And then, of course, the final domino has no choice. It's being knocked over by the full energy of the previous 3 dominoes. And he would use this as a metaphor for daily operations. How you wake up and what you eat and how much sleep you got the night before are the first domino in your day. And then the order of what you do in that day. Do you choose to work out right away, or do you choose to drink coffee right away? Do you choose to, kiss your wife and children right away, or do you choose to put on your glasses and go into the office right away? Every decision we make creates energy for the next domino in our day. So then by the time you get to the end of your day, it's out of your control. Like, all of the decisions that you've made have all piled up to the last domino. He also used to use that same metaphor to explain national level decisions and how you influence or how you shape what happens at a national level. When I consider his metaphor with where we are now, there's a political domino. And that political domino has fallen into a fiscal domino. So now there's 2 energies that are driving fiscal decisions. That fiscal domino is going to then fall into a social domino. And we're going to see a change in our society because of the fiscal energy and the political energy that have come before it. And at some point in time, the last domino is going to drop. And that last domino might be different for everybody. But what I'm seeing is that the cause and effect element is starting to shape how people make their decisions. Because while we all may get entertained by what happens politically, and we all may like to watch the FBI director call a member of the Senate, a buffoon, like just happened. Maybe we like to watch that because it feels like reality TV, but we don't actually like to see the outcome of our fiscal dollar losing value. We don't like to see the uncertainty of what our financial future looks like. One of the outcomes of that financial domino is that 53% of wealthy Americans who have a net worth of $2 million or more, 53% of those Americans are leaving the country. They are getting golden visas, or they're actively investing overseas so that they have a way of diversifying their wealth and growing their success outside of the United States because they don't know what's going to happen inside the United States. 53%. That means 1 out of every 2 wealthy people already have started investing or getting a second visa or getting a second passport or getting a golden visa to go somewhere else. And that number is expected to increase to 60% by this time in 2027. So in a year, or in 2026, in a year's time, it's going to be 60% of wealthy Americans who have diversified their interests outside of the United States, specifically tied to their citizenship.
That's not a strong vote of confidence.
That's not a strong vote of confidence
for where we're going, and obviously all the prayers that we will get to where we're going. I think, for me, one of the real tragedies of the Charlie Kirk assassination was it wasn't what he believed; it's how he went about it. I really believe personally, it's my personal belief, that the public Charlie Kirk was the real Charlie Kirk, that he was actually saying what he believed and actually speaking about it, and then having conversations with other people about what they really believed. And they were contesting their ideas. I saw a clip where somebody, they were in a debate, and that's what Charlie Kirk would do. He would go to a place where there would be opposition, and he would, tell his people, all right, we're going to let these people talk. We're going to actually receive what they have to say, and then we're going to debate their ideas. And this gentleman, he wasn't able to debate Charlie Kirk's ideas, so he challenged him to a fist fight. And Charlie was like, the point of our civilization is that we don't have to resort to violence, that we can allow our ideas to contest in the field, the philosophical, landscape of ideas. So our ideas fight so that we don't have to. And I believe that he stood for having those debates and having those conversations and actually allowing the ideas to contest themselves rather than the people. And I think that points a way forward. And I can only hope that, whatever you believe about Charlie's premises, again, I had, a lot of qualms with Charlie's premises. He didn't believe the same things that I believed, but the way he went about sharing his beliefs and receiving the challenges to his beliefs, I absolutely think is the way. Like, we have to start having those conversations and allow our ideas to contest themselves publicly so that we can see it. And then understand that the way that we actually combat is not with guns and sniper rifles. It's with ideas.
Yeah, that is the path forward. And that is the path that I think has the biggest question mark on it. Because that path takes patience. It takes work. It takes effort. And not only is that path on its own energy intensive, but we also have to steer ourselves off of our current path to get to that path, to get to the place where our ideals stand for themselves, where the contest is a contest of thoughts and ideas and philosophy, as we collectively choose what we want to be. Because that silent majority that sits between the far left and the far right, that silent majority is so much more aligned than we realize. Mm-hmm. It's so much more aligned than we realize, but they're silent. They don't verbalize their ideas. They don't show up to events. They don't leave comments on YouTube or on Instagram, right? They are silent in what they do. So as a result, we see the chaos of the two extremes, and everybody in the middle is just watching. What we don't realize is it's the people in the middle that are going to be the most affected by the decisions that are coming to light as a result of the two extremes. And if we let ourselves keep swinging back and forth, then we're not in a good place. I like to use the example of Adolf Hitler here, not because of Hitler himself, but because of the actions that led to Adolf Hitler. There was a parliament that voted to create the position of the Führer. And that same group of bureaucrats were the ones that appointed Adolf Hitler to that position. So there are many, many steps that could have prevented from this all-powerful man. There's many steps that could have prevented from the position of a Führer. And I'm not saying that we ourselves are in the position of having a Hitler, but there's a sequence of events, there's a series of dominoes that lead to that kind of government, to lead to that kind of central autocracy. And we are on a path that could be a similar path. So we have to ask ourselves, is that the path? Is that where we want to end up? Mm-hmm. Or do we want a different city?
I mean, is this potentially what the end game looks like for those kind of deeper state powers that have been, kind of orchestrating that? We don't know exactly what they are or who they are or what their motives are, but it seems like if you wanted the end result to be a centralized autocratic power, a new Führer, a new kind of, whether that's a technocracy that controls an AI-driven technocracy that controls the people, or a single individual, but this kind of totalizing of control, it seems like there's been dominoes that have been knocked over that lead to a high likelihood of that being the outcome, where the people say, we need more totalizing control so that we feel safe.
And that's the trend I think that we're seeing around the world. When you see not just obvious autocracies like Saudi Arabia that still has a kingdom, or China that has a central Politburo, but when you also look at countries like Israel. Israel has Netanyahu in power. He's been in power for 18 years. They are a democracy. They are absolutely a free market. However, they are a very strong centralized power. And that's why we continue to see Israel making decisions that are independent of the UN, independent of the best interest of their allies, independent of arguably the best interest of even their own long-term role as an international player. And in response to mounting pressure, Netanyahu, when he speaks to his own people, he tells them it's time for us to prepare for what might be a period of time where we are fully isolated by the rest of the world. So that means and he's not crazy, he's not interpreted as crazy among his own people, right? As Israelis choose whether they are pro-Bibi or not pro-Bibi, and there are plenty of people on both sides, the austerity measures that he is preparing them for, a self-sufficient Israel, meaning they feed themselves and they live off of their own internal economy, and they basically cut themselves off from the rest of the world. That's an option that they are realistically considering. That's an option that the prime minister is saying from the pulpit when he speaks to his own people. And it's not unheard of. It's not ludicrous to them. It's a very real option on the table. That completely undoes what we've been working on even before World War II, the idea of a unified, peaceful, cooperative human race, where we are actively engaging in conversations where we are considering opting out of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's there's many stories from history of warring tribes. You can look at, city-states in Italy, or, Greek nation-states, the Spartans and the Athenians, and they were always fighting against each other and all of this. We then kind of moved into this more global, okay, there's the United Nations, we're all going to roughly work together. And then now it seems like we're actually spreading potentially further apart, at least multipolar in our way, which has always been the case to some degree. But I think fundamentally at some point we have to look at the world's problems as all of our problems. Like, we all share the same home. Like if you have somebody destroying one part of your home and then drilling into the water pipes in your bathroom, all the water in the house is going to go out, right? Like you can't have a shared home and not get along with your roommates. It's not going to fucking work, and I'm not seeing like a lot of the cooperative efforts going on at that level of the infrastructure level of governments, but I am seeing it at the somewhat encouraging signs at the consciousness level, where more people are becoming aware of those older, traditional indigenous beliefs. Aho, Mentaku, Yeo, Yasin, we are all related, these ideas. So it's this interesting battle that's happening between the momentum of legacy institutions in these win-lose metrics in this competition race to the bottom, and then this kind of rise of a more holistic consciousness, which sees everybody as a child of God and as a brother or a sister.
And I agree with you, because I'm seeing the same thing. We were just talking about it off camera. I am finding that the more I engage with highly successful, highly productive, high achievers, the more they are asking that spiritual question, the more they are exploring, how do I connect with an energy source that is a completely different vibration, that is something more true, something more organic than the frequencies that are coming from the airwaves, because there's so much frenetic negative energy, so much frenetic competition and conflict that even biologically, we can feel that it's not right. Human beings don't, as an organic creature, we don't seek out conflict. We seek out consistency. We seek out parity. We seek out peace, because we all understand that survival is preeminent, and conflict does not guarantee survival, but cooperation, collaboration does. It's why we are tribal by nature. It's why the individual instinct is unnatural to us. It's much easier for us to be the silent majority and appear like we fit in and keep our opinions to ourselves, because that ensures our long-term survival subconsciously. The idea of seeking conflict, of being confrontational, of debating our ideas is counter to our instinct to try to survive. But we have these people asking the question, how do I get to the truth? How do I get to something that is energetic? And I find that the question is always coupled with the question of plant-based medicine.
Yep.
It's always coupled with the idea of meditation. It's always coupled with the idea of something that is yet to be defined in mainstream science.
This brings me to something that I wanted to share, which is a CIA operation called Operation Often. Have you heard about that?
No.
I'll read about it. I'll read it to you. But I'll start there, and then I'll get to the point that I'm ultimately going to make. So,
Operation Often.
Operation Often was initiated around 1967 and 1968 by Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, head of the CIA's Technical Services Division, as part of the agency's Cold War efforts to investigate unconventional methods for intelligence gathering, behavioral manipulation, and psychological warfare. Often was a successor or parallel to MK Ultra, which famously tested LSD and other drugs on unwitting subjects, but it shifted focus toward the esoteric and supernatural. The program's official mandate, per declassified memos, was to, quote, explore the world of black magic and, quote, harness the forces of darkness, end quote, to determine if occult forces could be weaponized for operational use, such as influencing minds, predicting events, or disrupting enemies. It challenged the idea that the inner reaches of the mind are beyond reach, blending pharmacology with mysticism. Testing occurred at facilities including hospitals, prisons, and universities, often involving animal and human subjects. Recruitment of occult practitioners, CIA operatives, including Gottlieb, consulted and recruited a wide array of individuals such as fortune tellers, palm readers, clairvoyants, astrologers, mediums, psychics, demonologists, witches, warlocks, and Satanists. These consultations aimed to test whether rituals, spells, or invocations could produce verifiable effects, like inducing hallucinations, altering behavior, or gaining intelligence insights.
How crazy is what you just read? Like, it's not unheard of for the time, but where we're sitting right now, Like we were trying to weaponize the inner mind.
Yes. And so the point that I was going to get to is in the mindset that everything is war, they were, the intelligence, the intelligence apparatus was willing to investigate dark magic, black magic, occult power, consulting Satanists, consulting these dark rituals to see if they could weaponize it. And of course, who knows what ended up happening to that? Eventually the program was stopped, but maybe, did it continue? Did they find some success? There's obviously circles within circles of what gets continually classified or not shared. I don't know how that system works. You probably know better than me. But one way or another, they were testing the dark forces. But where is the idea to test, what happens if we actually test the light forces, the angelic forces, the power of God, to actually unify people and to help them make better decisions? It just seems like this is because of the mindset, which is everything is war. We, including, just speaking broadly for the U.S. and our intelligence apparatus, we were willing to test these occult magical practices, which are highly disruptive to the brain. You start tapping into this, you play on the dark side. From all of my psychedelic plant medicine experiences, it's highly confusing and disruptive. You have to be very mindful, if you actually start to engage with the dark side of the force, to use a Star Wars term. It's not something to be trifled with, nor something that anybody who has any sense even messes with. But because everybody also knows there's the light side, and that's actually where you can find your own personal fulfillment, and you can also provide massive healing. What seems to be necessary is a fundamental shift. Okay, if we're willing to test, the powers of these dark forces for war, what about the powers of goodness and love and beauty and truth? What effect will that have on a population if we want our population to actually thrive? It seems like we're at a place where if we're willing to test the darkness, we got to test the light, and we got to actually see what that experiment, how that might run. And even Israel, what would have happened if they took this, as a horrible atrocity, what happened to them? Unspeakable things happened, and hostages were taken, etc. And they've gone on the course that they've gone on. But as Charles Eisenstein points to, what would have happened if they just said, this horrible thing happened, and this is the state of the world. We have to do something about it. And we forgive, those that have transgressed us in these horrible ways, but we trust in God and love to actually heal. What would have changed and rippled through the world? But that's not in the game theory strategy of our powers. The game theory of, trusting love, God, beauty, goodness doesn't seem to be an option. It would just be laughed out of probably the cabinet meetings or whatever the meetings are that occur. But that must be a part of how we're going about this, because, we really need some miracles here, and we need to actually start trusting that there's benevolent allies, not just witches, warlocks, and Satanists, that there's actually benevolent allies that are on our side, and we need their fucking help.
So, I love what you're saying, and I can see the path that you're laying out. But the reality is that where the path that you're laying out, when it meets the pragmatism of economic theory, because economic theory is what drives state behavior, the two are fundamentally opposed. If you think about the foundation of economics is that everything is limited. There is a lack of sufficient resources to go around. Whereas to believe in God is to believe in abundance, that there's a surplus of resources to go along. You have to have faith in the resources you can't see, where in economics, you have to count the resources that you can see. So even when we talk about Operation Often, it makes complete sense to me as a CIA officer that they would invest in a way of weaponizing the limited resources of individuals who may already be in touch with the inner mind. Because if you can gain that advantage, then you have all of those resources before your enemies, your current enemies have them, and also before your future enemies have them. So now that creates an abundance of resources that you control that you can use to limit access to resources for your current and future enemies. That's how the national security infrastructure works. That's why Israel, when they have to choose between forgiveness and conflict, they choose conflict, because they choose conflict not only because they're counting current resources, but they want to reduce resources for future threats as well, which is why you saw them escalate from just being a war against Hamas to being a war against Hezbollah, to being a war against the Houthis, to being a war against Iran, to invading Syria. You could see how they just continued to escalate because there was always an economic justification for reducing your future enemies. The same reason the United States is involved in supporting Ukraine. They understand that supporting Ukraine is a future play to continue to reduce Russia and Russia's impact in the future by letting Ukrainians die instead of American citizens die, which we have a more open acceptance for, because when you count the number of lives economically, there's a different valuation through the eyes of the American government of an American life versus a Ukrainian life.
There's that famous quote, I believe it's Einstein, who says, you can't solve a problem at the level of consciousness it was created. Mm-hmm. We're at that point.
That's fair.
We cannot solve this problem at the consciousness of scarcity. And, this is a classic Rosicrucian, contest between the Ahrimanic forces. So Ahriman was the great reducer. It was the only thing that's real is that which can be counted, that which can be measured. Everything else doesn't exist. And then there's the Christos, the Christ energy, which is everything is abundant, equal in love, and filled with the infinite love of the divine, right? So it's the radical, unconditional love and forgiveness, and the things that can't be counted. And they're both kind of two sides of a polarity that exists. And so we're in this very Ahrimanic world, and all of the problems of the Ahrimanic world, of the reductionism to that which can be counted, is creating this problem. I believe, have to shift the level of consciousness to see the world from a different place. Now, that transition, I'm not going to be Pollyannish and say that's going to be easy, nor is it going to be easy for, just one country to do it while the other countries are still playing the other game. It's difficult, and I don't have the plan for how to deploy this, but the vision of shifting our consciousness to solve the problem at a different level seems to be the only way out of this mess.
And I think that what we're agreeing on so much here, it's really exciting to me, because we're both agreeing that the future is going to be difficult. It's unclear. It's going to take work, and it's going to take an uncomfortable amount of work and risk, just like you're saying, to pursue the Christos energy and or to answer the policy questions about how we're going to defend ourselves. Both of those have incredible parallels to them. But what's fascinating to me is that the hunt for that abundant energy, the hunt to find that thread or that light, that hunt is actively being pursued, not just by the very wealthy and the people who are leaving the United States and diversifying their bets, right? I'm on that journey to find that energy myself. And there are plenty of people who are in a different economic level who are also on the search, all across the spectrum on that search. It makes me wonder whether or not there is a collective point where the pendulum shifts, where there's enough people who believe in it that somebody does take, or some organized group of people, whether it's a country or whether it's an organization or whether it's a movement, where they take the step to actually change the direction that we're on, where they make an offer. They even cross out of spirituality and into politics to try to make a political shift that is driven by spirituality. We've seen it in other parts of the world. That's how Hezbollah came to power as an actual government organization in Lebanon. That's how Hamas came to power as a political organization in the Gaza Strip, was through this ideal that created a political movement. They jumped the divide, right? It'd be amazing to see that here in the United States.
Yeah. And, the ability for this kind of religion ethos to actually galvanize a population. And actually, I mean, this is also one of the things that I don't think we're accurately assessing in this kind of war on terror, is they are deeply believing their own ideologies, and they are willing to fight and die happily for those ideologies. What do we as Americans believe in? What is our goodness, truth, and beauty that we can unify? And I think those, if we do want a strong America, it is not only, aspirational, but practical to say, like, let's get back to one nation under God and allow for a context of diversity of what we believe God is, but understand that God is value at the very least. And now let's debate what values those are. And let's use the best of philosophy, the best of our minds, and the best of the scriptures, and the best to understand what God is, and then unify under God and still allow the context for the diversity, but use that common sense sacred axioms of, like, this is not right. Like, what happened, in all of these atrocities, we know that's wrong. We know it in our own very body. There's a deep kind of imperative to actually reclaim value and reclaim this understanding that we are all sharing a common planet with a common set of values. We may have some differences and debates about how to deploy that, but let's have those contests. But underneath that is a bedrock of commonality. And we have to get to that place. And we have to actually arrive at a place where everybody can see how much more we all have in common than we don't.
When I first started my company, I remember having multiple conversations with business peers, with clients, with podcasters, where they were asking, what mattered to me? What mattered to me about my message? What mattered to me about how people would remember me, how my kids would remember me when they see me 15 years from now, 20 years from now, when I'm old and grizzled and gray, and they still watch, videos of me when I'm less old and grizzled and less gray. And I remember one of the big things that was always important to me was I wanted to have a positive message. I wanted to be truthful. I wanted to be practical, but I also wanted to be positive, because there's so much negative out there about CIA, and there's so much negative about CIA officers, and there's so much negative in media about how CIA operates. There's plenty of factual negative history that has come to light in the public sphere about CIA. So it was really important to me to be positive. And it's been such a struggle personally, because I'm running out of positive things to say. There's plenty of truth, but it's hard to be optimistic unless you are leaning into faith, unless you are leaning into the undefined, the unknown, unless you are leaning into belief. What practically, empirically shows is just, it's discomfort. It's discomfort. It's change that has to happen instead of change that we are initiating on our own. And that's been a challenge for us. It's been a challenge as a person, a challenge as a dad, a challenge as a business owner, a challenge as a marketer, because anybody who runs a business right now knows they could make more money if they lean into the fear. If they amplify the fear and they amplify the limitation and they capitalize on the anger. You can sell more right now. You could sell more insurance. You could sell more houses. You can sell more gold if you just lean into the negative. And for anybody who's trying not to be a transmitter, not to be additive to the already existing negativity, it's a very difficult choice to make.
Yeah, these are the small moral choices that we have to make to see how we are contributing. As a podcaster, we get test results based on what titles we use, what thumbnail copy we use, and the fear-based titles and thumbnails seem to always perform the best. Now, there's exceptions to that, of course, but everybody has to ask themselves: Are we contributing to the problem for, again, that one marshmallow that we can eat right now at the cost of 5 marshmallows that we could all eat and share with our friends because we've had enough fucking marshmallows, we're full, and then we got an abundance to share. I think all of us have to start making those choices and thinking about the generations to come, and not just our life, not just our legacy, but our children's lives and their legacy, and children 7 generations forward, 77 generations forward. Like, what is the legacy of humankind? What is the legacy of this experiment, of this reboot of civilization after the Great Flood? Like, is this going to be a success, or is this going to be kind of balled up, like, God says, all right, that was a nice try, let's throw that one in the garbage and let's try again, maybe they'll get it figured out this time. I mean, we don't really know which way it's going to go, but it seems like there's no greater thing to fight for than to fight for, let's see if we can make it this time.
It's funny because if we don't fight, it's not funny. That's my coping mechanism right there, right? The question that is so relevant to me is in large part what you just said. Are we going to fight the way that we've been fighting, or are we going to change the way that we resist our temptation, the mood, pressures outside of us, etc.? And there are changes happening at the national security level. There are changes happening that the government is initiating on its own to combat what it determines, what it sees as future threats. And that's a big part of what I was involved in when I was at CIA. It's a big part of the book that I just released, talking about how America is making those changes, how it's making changes to keep the American people safer, how it's making changes to combat adversaries that are also changing. And I say that because the changes that the national security infrastructure are making are not the same changes that we need to have as a human race in order to pick a new path. Because while we are shifting, we're shifting 5, 7, 12 degrees, but we're still going predominantly...
Still playing the same game.
Predominantly one direction.
Yeah. So I want to get to a couple questions that I have is just out of my own ignorance. So for one, we've had 2 recent assassination attempts from rooftops. I don't personally understand the security failure of check the fucking rooftops, right? Like, what is going on there? Why? I mean, like, it seems like look, if I was going to be in that type of position of Charlie Kirk or the type of position of Donald Trump, and that's not my intention to be in that position, but who knows how far the targets, will go. If I ever get to the point where I have a security detail, I'm going to be like, yo, y'all are watching the rooftops like all the time. You know what I mean? Like, so that's one thing. Like, walk me through that. I don't understand why you don't check that.
So you do check it. It's actually one of the priority things in any kind of security detail. Whenever you pre or advance a location, you're looking for vectors of attack, vectors of threat. And roofs are a very well-known, very established, altitude, really, elevation.
For sure.
Is a very well-known vector of attack, because when you have elevation, you have a clear line of sight. You also maintain distance versus, say, an attacker. There was a famous attack in the 1950s. I just lost the name. I lost the name of somebody who tried to kill a president in a restaurant up close. So there's 2 different types of threats, right?
I think Reagan was shot up close, right?
Reagan was shot up close.
Yeah.
But so if you are a premeditated attacker and you are choosing a premeditated location that is outdoors, altitude is your friend, elevation is your friend. So then when you come to advance a location, you have to think like the wolf. You have to think like the attacker. Where would be the best vector? And what the attacker doesn't know is exactly how the foreground is going to be set up. So like with Charlie Kirk, there were tents, there were flags. With Donald Trump, there were bleachers. So when you set up a location in advance, you're essentially showing the threat how the stage is going to be set up. So that allows them more opportunity to choose where they're going to shoot from. Now, with both Thomas Crooks and Tyler Robinson, the person who tried to shoot Trump in Pennsylvania and the person who shot Charlie Kirk in Utah. In both of those situations, they chose rooftops that were approximately the same distance, 175 yards, 150 yards. Part of the reason they chose that distance is because that's not a impossible shot with a commercial hunting rifle or a commercial assault rifle, right? The average person with decent vision, Thomas Crooks was in glasses, for crying out loud. So the average person with a little bit of familiarity can make a shot from that distance, which is why there's a 200-yard mandate for the most part, minimum safe zone for any rooftop in the area. With President Trump, you saw failures in his Secret Service response time, et cetera, that led to the shot being pulled off at all. But you also saw that Thomas Crooks was immediately killed on the same rooftop where he fired his shot. Charlie Kirk didn't have that kind of security detail, whether that was because they didn't think they needed it.
It's just super expensive too. I mean,
it's a very expensive thing to have, right?
Yeah.
But you still saw something similar. One of the big differences, though, between Thomas Crooks and Tyler Robinson is where Thomas Crooks set himself up in Butler, Pennsylvania. He did not have a route of escape. The conclusion that you have to lead from that is that he went up on that roof to try to kill the future President Trump with the intention that he would try to kill Trump, but he knew full well he would not escape. He had no route of escape. He had no planned egress. He was in trouble. He was going to die that day. Where Tyler Robinson had a very well-planned egress route. He had a plan for how he was going to dispose of the weapon. He had a plan for where he was going to go next. It's very similar to Luigi Mangione. They had a plan for how they were going to get off the X after they committed their act of violence. So when you think like the wolf, these are the things that you're thinking about. Is the shot realistic for me? Is it within the right range? What's the right weapon? What's my way of approach in? What's my way of egress out? What will be the response time for federal or for protective services afterwards? So why rooftops? Because you get the best opportunity for everything. If you're in front of the crowd with a handgun, how are you going to get out? How are you going to egress? You're going to be slowed down by the crowd itself, right?
Yeah. It just seems like not enough attention is paid to the most obvious way if somebody cares about actually. I mean, obviously in this kind of suicidal homicide, it's like that's what's so dangerous in some of the areas that, you used to work is there's this idea where you can actually literally put bombs on yourself and become a human bomb. Well, when that changes the rules of every engagement of everything, right? That makes everything so much more dangerous. If you're willing to drive your own vehicle, which is a bomb, into something knowing that your vehicle will explode, well, fuck, that's a whole new vector that you have to deal with. Even the kamikaze pilots in World War II, right? It's like they weren't trying to just bomb and get out and go home to see their family. They were committed to die in that, and that changes it. But most likely somebody's going to look for a way to escape, which means most likely it's going to be on a rooftop, which means got to get eyeballs on those roofs. And, it just seems like that's, to me, like definitely like a security failure. And I'm not trying to blame the actual individuals on security detail. I'm sure they're fine folks with a lot of training, but it just is like, like we gotta look at that, what seems like the most likely way that somebody's going to be attacked. And the other thing I just want to mention real quick and have you comment on, both those gunmen, as someone who hunts, taking a 200-yard shot is not that difficult. Now, of course, it's way more difficult when you actually see the animal in front of you because you get what they call buck fever. And I can only imagine what that's like. I mean, these are clearly sociopaths, so they may actually have shut off that feeling of nervousness but ultimately it's a way more difficult shot on an animal than it is a target when you're hunting, right? It's just kind of known. But it's not that difficult a shot. So people saying like, no way he could have pulled off that shot. Well, first of all, he wasn't aiming for Charlie's neck. Like nobody aims for the neck, so he missed, and the other shooter also missed, caught the ear. So they weren't exactly like dialed in accurate. So it seems quite plausible that he was the actual shooter. He, misjudged the elevation, maybe the ballistics of his of his bullet and how much drop it would have at that distance, or it's a variety of different things. But the second miss, of course, was a fatal miss, and so that seems to me plausible that he could have pulled off the shot, but it still leaves me questions about like why security details aren't paying more attention to really focusing on these rooftops.
I want to be very clear that I am 100% defending the professionalism of the security details, because in hindsight, it's easy to focus on the rooftop because that's where the threat came from. But before the threat presents itself, the threat could come from anywhere.
Right.
The front row, the middle of the left side, behind the bleachers, under the bleachers. It could be someone who drives a car across the barrier in the middle of the presentation. So you've got a limited number of people, 5, 7, 12, 25, you name it. You've got a limited number of people and an infinite number of threat vectors.
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying their best to reduce as best they can, but you can't reduce everything. And when the threat presents itself, oftentimes you have to respond to the threat. It's funny that there's my coping mechanism again, right? It's funny. It's not funny that the executive protection world has recently gone through the process of empiricalizing, of measuring, of testing the effectiveness of close protection. And what they have found in their research is that 88% of close protection responses results in the death of the principal. So that means 88% of the time that a threat presents itself and executive protection has to step in to protect the principal, 88% of the time, the principal is lost. That means it's only 22% of the time.
12%.
12% of the time. In the last, I think it was a 20-year study, 24-year study. In the last 24 years, there's only 12% of instances where the principal survived. That doesn't mean the principal was uninjured, but the principal survived.
Wow.
Right? Those numbers are daunting. And what the executive protection industry is waking up to is the fact that if you're focused on close protection, if you're focused on response, you're going to lose your principal. So you need to be focused on advanced intelligence, on preparation, on predicting threat vectors, on forcing threat vectors, so that you can limit the number of places where you have to worry about an attack. Instead of having an outdoor rally, having an indoor rally.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of having a live rally, having a virtual rally.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of allowing 10,000 people, you allow 2,000 people, and they're all pre-vetted, right? There's all these measures that are being taken, not just for politicians, but for CEOs and for CFOs and for investors around the world, where they're realizing that close protection services are only effective a little over 10% of the time.
Mm-hmm. There was also, another recent tragic event on the bus, where a Ukrainian woman was stabbed to death. And, these things are all happening in kind of short succession here. And, violence, and there's shooters. I mean, there's so many shootings and shooting attempts that are happening now. They almost even don't make that much of a blip in the news cycle. What is, for the average citizen, like, what do you think we should be doing to prepare ourselves for this world where it's seemingly, there's more violence? Like what should have, and I think her name was Irina, but I can't exactly recall the Ukrainian woman's name, but like, what are the steps that ordinary people should take, just citizens, even if they're not a high profile target, to be safer?
That's such a good question. There's the primary lesson that all elite operators are taught when it comes to personal security, self-defense, defensive tactics, if you will. The first thing that we're taught is that you need distance from the threat. Distance is your best friend. With distance, you also gain time. So that's physical distance, meaning if you want to protect yourself from a shooter, stand further away. If you want to protect yourself from somebody who presents a knife, stand further away. It's a very simple concept. But distance creates time, and you need that time to reach a good response, because your instinctive response may not be the best response for you. There's 4 sympathetic responses that your body goes through when it's in immediate threat. There's fight or flight, which we're all very familiar with. And if somebody presents a knife and you don't have a knife, fight is not the response that you necessarily want to have. Flight means that you run away. Oftentimes, flight is not the best response either, because when you run away, you're actually exposing the most vulnerable parts of your body to the threat.
Your
back, your spinal column, your nerve endings, easier access to all of your organs like your kidney, your livers, or your kidneys, your liver, the lungs, everything's so much more accessible from the back than it is from the front. So when you turn to flee, you're actually reducing your chances of survival.
You better trust your Nikes.
And then you've got two other sympathetic responses that people don't talk about. There's freeze, where you literally don't know what to do. The information is too much, so your body just freezes.
Too unfamiliar as well.
We've all seen deer do this in headlights, right? They freeze. But then there's also something called fawn. And fawn is when you immediately subjugate yourself to the threat in an effort to try to appease them before they hurt you. We see this in abusive relationships. You also see this in those movies where people beg for their life. Oh, please, please. That's not fighting, fleeing, or freezing. It's fawning, right? And that's a very real sympathetic response. When you gain distance, you gain time to process through all four of those sympathetic responses before you make a conclusion as to what is the best survivable approach for you to take. So I say that because the first thing people need to do is they need to increase their distance. Before you go into a mall, drive around the mall. Get out of your car and stand by the back of your car just for a second to see what's happening in the area around you. Does it look normal? Does it not look normal? This is something we call situational awareness. You gain situational awareness with distance. As you close distance, you decrease your reaction time. So you want to make sure that you're controlling when you choose to decrease your distance, when you choose to decrease your reaction time, because you're increasing the risk to yourself. As your situational awareness confirms that it's safe to move forward, then you move forward. What are the busiest times to be at the mall? Do you want to be at the mall in those busiest times? Because when you are, it reduces your distance, it reduces your time. The mall can be a stand-in for the grocery store. It can be your child's school. It can be your church. How many people find themselves getting to church at the last minute, rushing into church at the last minute, working through the crowd, right? Your attacker is using distance, time, and situational awareness against you. They've been there for a while. Or they are still yet to come because they know that the peak attack is going to happen when everybody's distracted trying to rush into their seat, when the first note from the band strikes up. So you've got to use the same tools that the attacker is using against you. So defense and time by far are the two best things that you can use because they allow you to gain situational awareness. We can go very deep into what other techniques people can use, but when it comes to conceptual, simple understanding, those are the first things that we're taught and the first things that I would want everyone else to learn.
I'd heard and read somewhere that there was a time where there was, during Prohibition, where there was just unbelievable gang violence of different gangs trying to control different production and distribution of alcohol. And there was just murders happening all over in Chicago and different places. And, one of the rules of thumb was to never be in a seat where your back was to, things that you couldn't see. So find yourself in a seat where actually you have visibility, and visibility is also distance, because there's no distance when you can't see what's behind you.
Correct.
Because somebody can actually broach that distance to zero without you even knowing. And that's what happened in the railroad car in that attack. So, one idea is to find the place where you have high visibility, and then probably also be thinking about, all right, what is my escape route?
Yes.
What is my egress route? Well, how do I, if something goes down, how do I leave? So if you're and again, this is tough, because if you're in a packed theater, you may be stuck in the middle fucking seat, and that's just what you want to do. You want to be there for the show, right?
Should have gotten there earlier, kind of thing. Yeah, you're
going to watch Hamilton, so you're going to want the middle seat, but also thinking about, all right, where are the exits? Where do I have the most visibility? If you are concerned about taking those extra steps, it seems like those are just also simple rules, like keep your back to a wall or some place that you can't go, and then know what your escape in egress route is if something goes down.
So there's, and I'm glad that you bring this up, because there are very simple, very demonstrable tools that you can use, that you can remember to keep yourself safe. When you park under a lamp. Don't park away from a lamp, park under a lamp. Most people don't do that because they're afraid of birds pooping on their car, or the lamp is too far away and there's a closer parking spot. Park under a lamppost, because if you're approaching your car at night, the dark and the light are opposites, and the light on your car will actually deter a threat from attacking you when they could attack someone else who's going to be in a darker area. Backing into your parking spot. This is a big one. We're taught to always back into our parking spot. We're also taught that when you choose a parking spot that has a direct route of escape. Not direct meaning there's a straight road. Direct meaning there's no building or fence in your way. Your car can go over a curb. It can go over the grass. It can drive through the dirt. You don't have to worry about those things. If there's a disaster, if there's something, a fire that breaks out or a shooting that breaks out at the grocery store, you want to be able to get to your car, start your car, and drive straight away from the threat. Over the curb, through the grass, over the dirt, onto the highway, right? That's way better than being trapped in some sort of gridlock thing where you're trying to back out and everybody else is trying to back out, and all of a sudden the cars hit each other and nobody can go anywhere. So park under a light, back into your parking spot. When you're indoors, yes, you want your back to a wall. I completely agree with that. Even better if you can have your back against a solid wall, not a wall with glass.
Right.
You don't want to be anywhere close to a road that parallels a glass storefront, because now drive-by attacks or even secondary attacks, if they're trying to shoot somebody at the next restaurant over, but stray bullets come through the glass at your restaurant, now you have to worry about glass, and you have to worry about bullets, and you have to worry about what you're wearing on your feet. So stay away from flip-flops, stay away from Crocs, look for laced shoes, look for solid toes, because these are all things that are going to keep you safe in the event that the worst thing happens. So back to a solid wall is much better than back to a glass wall. If you don't have a solid wall, or if there's no place available with a solid wall, then you want to have as few people between you and the wall behind you as possible. So you sit towards the back of the restaurant, or you sit deeper into the restaurant rather than in the front. There's a spectrum that we teach at CIA between convenience and security. They're opposite sides of a spectrum. So wherever you land, you're going to land closer to one, but further from the other. And the more convenient your lifestyle is, the less secure it's going to be. And the more secure your lifestyle is, the less convenient it's going to be.
It just seems like these basic, simple principles, and also overarchingly, the awareness that the safe world that we may think we're in can erupt and be not safe in any moment. So to actually mentally prepare us, to premeditate, to rehearse what happens, what your response will be, and just to be thinking about this, just devoting a small amount of mental attention as a practice of your own discipline, I think is something that we're going to have to prepare for in these times that are, as you said, the momentum of the dominoes is leading towards potentially even more violence than what we've experienced now, which is already at an atrocious level. But some awareness and then some general principles. Another principle that, I think, I've heard is, if you're the man, you take the side of the bed that's closest to the entry to the house, right? Because you obviously want the chance to fight, and actually, at the very least, even if you can't win the fight, give your partner a chance to escape while you're there. Now, of course, if you're with a badass female Valkyrie warrior and she's the more proficient fighter, then she gets the one closest to the attacker. And
I want to have a drink with her.
Yeah, totally.
A Valkyrie warrior sounds amazing.
And they do exist. But, whoever's the most proficient and most willing to make that sacrifice, place yourself in that position. But when, I don't think probably hand-to-hand combat is like the deepest part of the training at the CIA, but I'm sure you guys go through, those instant moments. Is there anything that you could distill, that's like, all right, these are the basic principles. If of the four responses, fight is the response that is necessary, or the best response, or the instinctual response that you have.
So it's so interesting what you're bringing up, because I understand that most people in society probably view it as like, if you're the protector of the house, if you're the masculine energy, if you're the man, then you want to put yourself between the threat and whatever you're trying to protect. The actual defensive tactics terminology for that, it's a psychological label that we use. There's three types of instincts. There's a maternal instinct, and that's generally seen as the instinct to protect your loved ones by putting yourself between the threat and your loved ones. That's a maternal instinct. Then there's an individual instinct. The individual instinct is your instinct to keep yourself safe, whether you have loved ones or not. It's when, in the comedy movies, when somebody jumps behind their wife.
Yeah.
Right? That's your individual instinct. It's trying to keep yourself alive. And then there's something called a paternal instinct. The paternal instinct is not an instinct to stand in front of the threat and protect your loved ones or protect yourself. The paternal instinct is actually to attack the threat. It's the natural instinct that we have to recognize that the threat is not just going to go away, that the best way to combat the threat is with force, to actually attack the threat, because that will not only keep your loved ones safe, but it will keep other loved ones safe as well. And when people are born with a paternal instinct, they don't even really think about keeping themselves safe, or they naturally understand that attacking the threat is how they're going to keep themselves safe. Because if we run right now, if we escape out the back door, what's to keep the threat from coming to the back door and still trying to shoot us? What's to keep the threat from chasing us? If we get in our car and drive away, what's to keep the threat from getting in a car and chasing us? That paternal instinct understands we have to neutralize the threat. When CIA and DOD did military studies, combative studies, to see which of these instincts was better, paternal instinct won out significantly, almost 4-1, where when the threat was actively attacked by an individual with a paternal instinct, whether that's a grenade that gets thrown on the ground and somebody throws themselves on the grenade, or runs towards a grenade, picks it up and throws it back, or whether it has to do with an actual home invasion, when somebody comes into a home and they try to attack the family, they try to steal, and some member of the family, not always the father, sometimes the son, sometimes the daughter, sometimes the dog, when somebody attacks the threat, they neutralize the threat, and they not only protect the rest of the family, but they protect the whole neighborhood, right? That paternal instinct is a very powerful instinct, and it's what CIA tries to encourage us all to develop first. So to go back to that home invasion, if somebody breaks into your home, it doesn't really matter who's sitting on which side of the bed. When somebody wakes up, the question becomes, do we increase our distance to increase our time? Or is the threat so close to us that what we need to actually do to increase our distance is to attack the threat? Because attacking the threat will increase our time, our comparative distance to come up with a response. It's at that point that we start to engage with our hand-to-hand skills, with our defensive tactics. And what CIA teaches is the number one tool for self-defense is something that we call biomechanical advantage. It has nothing to do with strength. It has nothing to do with build. It doesn't even have to do with whether you've got experience in jiu-jitsu or the martial arts. Biomechanical advantage is the simple act of understanding that the human body is a mechanical creation. Arms only go one way, necks only go one way, and if you put pressure on a joint in the opposite direction, it creates pain, it creates tension, it creates a limitation of movement. So when we are taught how to defend ourselves, we're taught through a lens of biomechanical advantage. It's if I'm to continue kind of with my ramble, the simplest example I can think of is when somebody grabs your hair. Every woman with long hair, one of the secret fears that we don't ever admit, women and men alike, one of the secret fears that we never admit is, what if somebody grabs my hair? What if they grab my hair? How do I get out of that? How do I protect myself from that? The reason that people are so afraid of a hair grab, women specifically are so afraid of a hair grab, is because they understand intrinsically that if somebody grabs your hair, they control your neck.
Right.
The saying is, wherever the head goes, the body goes, right? The control over the neck is a very dangerous place. Your air flows through your neck. Blood to your brain flows through your neck. Your nerve endings flow through your neck. Your spinal column is most easily reached through the neck. So if somebody grabs your hair, they control your neck. If they control your neck and your head, they can do anything they want with you. They can throw you down. They can break your neck. They can do all sorts of terrible things. So we're taught that if someone grabs your hair, the first thing you do is you grab the hand that grabbed your hair and you push that hand against your scalp. What happens is that your head and their hand become one molded device. And now you just regained control of your own head because you're holding their hand on your head. And as they try to move your head, you have more biomechanical advantage to fight back. That change of control creates all sorts of secondary opportunities for now you to hold their hand in place while you wail on their face, wail on their sensitive areas, whether it's a groin or whether it's a sternum or whether it's their throat.
Mm-hmm.
Like you get a chance to fight back against your attacker because you've controlled the head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's, I'm friends with Tim Kennedy, and obviously he's come under some, sharp criticism for not honestly telling the stories of, his own time in service. And that's an unfortunate thing. I haven't talked to Tim about it specifically, but one thing about what he's been doing, which I really appreciate, is he has this whole program called Sheepdog Training, where it's about situational awareness and it's about like preparing yourself. And it really feels like if there is a high likelihood we're heading into a more dangerous situation, we have to train that paternal instinct. We have to train that situational awareness. We have to train some basics. Doesn't mean you have to be the highest level operator, but we all have to raise our base level of proficiency to another level to help not only keep ourselves safe, but to help keep society safe as a whole.
Yeah, we created a course called Operational Defense. We created a digital version of it called OpDef Plus, like Disney Plus with the little plus sign, specifically because people have been asking for this type of training. They want to understand what's the fastest, simplest way to train to defend yourself. So we created a digital version of what CIA taught us with our operational defensive tactics.
Nice.
And people can find that if they look up OpDef Plus. We'll make sure that you get a link so we can put it in the description.
And
notes
is that
below.
all found through Everyday Spy?
All found through Everyday Spy. And it's our way of trying to fill the gap, because for many people, they have spent years, decades focused on growing their financial security, but not growing their personal security. And now we're at a place where our personal security is being threatened in unprecedented ways. Yeah. And how do you get yourself to a place where you are sufficiently able to protect yourself and your loved ones? That is what OpDef Plus is for.
Yeah. And if you haven't accessed that paternal instinct and something goes down and you hide behind your girlfriend, I can only imagine how uncomfortable that's going to be when you're trying to have sex with your girlfriend later. Like I don't know, but it just appears to me that that's not going to be the most arousing of your characteristics.
Right?
She's not going to tell that story, and the girlfriends are going to be like, "Damn, that's sexy." It's gonna really be the opposite. And I think we are guided. I mean, why are we so eager to make money? We're eager to make money so that the goddess loves us, so that we're adored by the feminine. And I'm speaking from a masculine perspective because that's my own lens and purview. I'm not speaking for everybody, but for many men, and I would say the majority of men, a lot of this is about the adoration of the feminine. Okay, well, money is one vector for sure, and go for it. Go build your businesses, do your thing. And also, doesn't matter if you got a fancy Rolex on or whatever, but if you act as a coward in a time where you need to show up as a lion, like all of that counts for naught. Like all of that you've built, it all deteriorates in a moment. So, and also it seems as if everything linked to that paternal instinct has been, culturally attacked. It's all been associated with toxic masculinity or like this kind of instinct to violence, when it's not that at all. Yeah. It's actually an instinct for protection and provision. And so I think there's a important reclamation of, as you said in the studies and the training, like this instinct 4-to-1 is the instinct that's going to actually neutralize the threat, keep yourself, your family, and society safe.
Absolutely. And it's a powerful thing when you see that you have it in you. And that's another element of the way CIA trains. CIA trains by educating us first, and then we go into a process called exercising, where we exercise the thing that we were educated on. And then we go into a third phase of training called experience, where we experience the exercised skill in a real world environment where we have to fend for ourselves. So it's important because what ends up happening in society is we educate and we don't exercise. We educate and we expect that we're ready for the experience. And then when the experience presents itself, we oftentimes don't recall what we were educated in because we never exercised it. Right. So as people hear this conversation, I would encourage you to immediately start exercising how you park in the parking lot. Immediately start exercising. Find someone to grab your hair right now. Go to your spouse, go to your daughter and be like, let's do a real quick an exercise. I'm going to grab your hair. I'm just going to pull your head gently, and I want you to see what that feels like. And then I want you to hold my hand on your head, and I want to do it again. And it's night and day. When you see these things work, they're unforgettable, right? When you build a practice of sitting in the right place in a restaurant, when you build the practice of even assessing vectors of attack in a restaurant, where are the windows? I would challenge anybody right now, think of your favorite restaurant, the place where you eat the most often. Can you picture all four walls? Do you know where the street is in comparison to those four walls? Do you know where the windows are? How elevated are you either above the street, or are your windows actually at street level? What are the entrances and exits to those restaurants? Here's a hint. Almost every kitchen has its own dedicated exit. So if you count the hidden kitchen exit that you don't know is there, where are the other exits? Think about that. Work through that. And what you're going to find is that there are lots of restaurants out there, Chick-fil-A being one that people use all the time. 2 out of 4 walls are almost always lined with windows. And they are always street side because the restaurant is built to be easily accessed by vehicles.
Yeah.
So that's just a simple example of how we want people to think. And as you build up your education and your exercise and your experience, you'll start to experience that you have the skills that you've exercised.
Right.
And once you see your paternal instinct, it's incredibly comforting to know that it's there.
Yeah.
Because if what you see is individual instinct, you can't unforget. Like you can't unremember the fact that you jumped behind your girlfriend when that piece of glass fell off the truck and you thought it was a gunshot.
You know, I have one instance, you know, in my life, I questioned, because I'd never gotten in a street fight. I'd never been presented with a situation where the paternal instinct would have, I mean, small little situations where, you know, I saw somebody bullying somebody and I stood up, but it wasn't really scary, you know? So I had this question, like, do I have that in me? You know, like, do I have it in me? And then I was training MMA and I was going to go enter a fight because this wasn't happening to me in real life. So I needed to know that about myself. I didn't fully have the same kind of self-respect for myself that I needed. And coincidentally, in the middle of kind of training, preparing for an amateur fight, which was hopefully going to teach me that I was capable of doing something in that way, leaving a bar with my fiance at the time, Caitlin. There's 4 men surrounding the car. I didn't have the situational awareness to think that was dangerous. It was like, all right, but they were throwing like pizza toppings on my car. And I didn't have the situational awareness to understand that it was dangerous for my fiance to go around to the passenger side of the car. And obviously the gentlemanly thing to do is to open the car door in the first place, but I failed in that regard. And they got into an exchange and she was like, you know, don't throw why are you throwing pizza on my, you know, fiance's car? And he's like, I'll put my meat where I want, bitch. And she's like, don't disrespect my boyfriend. And this is all happening. And I'm on the other side of the car and he slams her face right into the window. And there's not a thought that occurred in my mind. I like flew around the car and I hit that guy as hard as I fucking could. And it was clean. He didn't expect me, I guess, to make it through that fast or whatever. He didn't see it coming. But then there was 3 other people. Now we were in a fight. And it worked out all right. I mean, my fiance jumped on one of their backs and he had the sensibility not to throw her off and do something terrible. So I had to fight 2 people. I got a concussion, but I managed to do all right. And, you know, but ultimately, while that was an intense and like kind of traumatic and happened so fucking fast. When that was finished, there was a deep peace that I had, like a deep peace that I had, like, oh wow, when there was no thought and there was no, and there was not me thinking about what I would do, what instincts were present. And I got to know that about myself. And that's been something that rests deep in the foundation of my psyche. Like, okay. And it's like, obviously I don't wish any situation like that to happen. It was an incredibly dangerous situation. It caused damage and, she was bleeding. I was bleeding. I had a concussion. It's a fucking nightmare. However, it was a great gift. It was a great gift to know. And I think, not all of us are going to get the gift to know how we'll respond, but there will be other, there may be times, and maybe you've had that and you've failed that test. That's okay. Forgive yourself, remember that and actually go through the exercises and the mental preparation to say, like, next time I'm going to act differently.
It's such a powerful story, man. It's such a powerful story. And the one kind of point that I want to sharpen is less that it's a pass-fail criteria and more that it's a self-awareness criteria. Right. Just like you became aware of the need for situational awareness, and you became aware of the threat as time went on. And then you became aware of your response time when the threat became acute.
Right.
Right? Like there's a lot of awareness that gets learned there. And I think that awareness is part of what also drove your sense of peace. I am aware that my natural response is maternal. And it's always been a problem for me. It was a problem for me in CIA training. It was a problem for me in military training. And it is my natural response. I have a maternal instinct. Just 3 months ago, I was at my friend's house with my kids and my dog just under a year old. And my dog is off-leash trained. So we go to leave the house. I open the door at my friend's house and my dog jumps out. Good dog, standing there waiting for me. A lady's walking her 2 German shepherds. A tiny lady with these 2 giant German shepherds is walking her 2 German shepherds on the sidewalk, maybe 25 feet away from the front door of the house. One of those German shepherds see my dog jump out. That German shepherd takes off. The lady's not strong enough to hold onto the leash, so she loses the leash. The dog comes snarling at my dog. Big teeth, big German shepherd. And my dog is like, what is this threat that's coming out of nowhere? So my dog does a quick turnaround and just tries to run around to stay away from the German shepherd. I move towards my dog, pull my dog underneath my legs, and stand between my dog and this snarling German shepherd. 100% the wrong thing to do. Luckily, the German shepherd could tell the difference between a person and a dog, and it didn't snap or bite at me. It had snapped and bit my dog's tail, so my dog's tail was bleeding. It had torn part of the skin off the tail, but it wasn't coming after me. And the lady came over and she apologized about her dog and blah, blah, blah. And I just wanted her away. Again, maternal instinct. Just go away. Just take the threat away. The thing I'm trying to protect is safe. And then I take my dog and do all the stuff that you're supposed to do when you get your dog bit. Even that was just a few months ago, man. And I'm still reminded that my instinct is maternal. My instinct is to stand between the threat. I didn't grab a fucking rock or a shovel. I could have grabbed an umbrella. I could have grabbed anything that was right there by the entrance of my friend's house, and I could have wailed the shit out of that German shepherd. It may not have gone well for me, but that's what a paternal instinct would have done. It wouldn't have hid my dog between my legs and then stood between like a wall. It would have damaged that dog. I would grab that dog's leash and wrestle it down to the ground. Who knows what, right? For anybody who's been attacked by a dog, for anybody who's had a dog attack their animal or their child, they know what their response was. And some people fight back against the dog. Fucking, that's all instinct. I actually have to put work into constantly training a paternal instinct, because in my responsiveness, when I was surprised in an unexpected confrontation, that's what I do.
And the result was actually the perfect result. So it doesn't mean that the paternal instinct always yields the best result, or the maternal instinct yields the best result. In many situations, in the aggregate, paternal actually yields the result more often. But I think that's really vulnerable, and actually, like, I have so much more admiration for you for sharing that, and also like not only your vulnerability, but also just an exercise in awareness. be aware of what your natural instincts are. And situations like that allow you, if you self-reflect, all right, what is my instinct here? Like, how do I naturally respond? And I think that's really important. And also, another thing I'll share too is a lot of times our instincts are not going to serve us. So anybody who's trained any little bit of jujitsu, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say you get a lot of fights end up on the ground, right? If you end up on the ground and your idea is to go onto your stomach so you can push yourself up and stand up, you've just exposed your back. It's the fucking worst thing you can do. Obviously now it's different if there's weapons and there's, different situations that call for different things. But the base level of jiu-jitsu training, you go to your back. You have you have your feet, you have up kicks, you have your guard, you have a whole variety of different things that you do. So if you get going to the ground, you flip to the back, you get your legs up, and that's actually the instinct. But it's not the instinct that we're trained, that actually is natural. It's not natural what you would do. Or even if someone like, if you're doing Muay Thai and someone gets a plum where they grab your neck, like there's an instinct to pull away. Oh, he's got my fucking neck. Let me pull away. Well, you pull away, they pull down, and then you get kneed in the fucking face, right? So what you have to do is, if that's there, there's different moves you can make, but it's toward, not away. Yeah. If you're on your back, it's stay on your back. Have all your hands and legs available rather than flip over to your belly, and then you're in deep shit and that. So little things that don't take like years of training. You don't need a fucking black belt in jiu-jitsu to figure that basic stuff out, right. Or, years of Muay Thai to understand, if someone grabs your neck, all right, well, what is the dangerous, what is the instinctual move and what is the actual right move? And it's just, again, it's exercise, it's training so that becomes a habit.
And we all understand that. On like a base level, we all understand the importance of learning something, exercising the thing that you just learned. What is the gym? What is a bicep curl? Learning how to do a bicep curl and then exercising it. Yeah. Right? And then experiencing the growth and learning the right type of combination of exercises at the right pacing and the right number of sets and reps. It's all learning it through experience so that you can make it instinctual, so that you can make it part of how you respond.
Yeah. Shadow Cell. It's blown up, man.
I'm excited.
The book's out. It's an incredible story. You told some of the story in the last podcast that we did, and it's going to be a full-on motion picture. It's going to be a movie. You got the book out now. How does it feel to have this story of yours told and made into a kind of a modern myth?
Yeah, it's humbling. It's funny, I was just in New York and DC for the book launch with my wife, and I was asking her the same question, because for me, it's part of the grind of business. Like, you grind through podcast interviews, and you grind through book interviews, and you grind through the process of writing a book and editing a book and pleasing all the different voices that have to be pleased, right? Editors and junior publishers and senior publishers. So there's an element for me that is just like, it is the next step in the grind. But for my wife, who helped me write it, and then like her anxiety keeps her from coming with me on the tour, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. So for her, it was kind of a limited effort. She got to write and produce the book, but then all of the debates and all the struggles to edit it and get it approved and all that stuff, she had a different role to play. So I asked her about how it felt, and it's, for her, she used the word surreal. It doesn't seem real. And for me, it seems real, but it doesn't seem as impactful as it probably should feel. We've been a bestseller for multiple weeks on Amazon already. We'll find out in the coming weeks whether or not we hit criteria to be Wall Street Journal bestseller, national bestseller, New York Times bestseller, any or none of those. Having a phone call with executives from Legendary Pictures is an unbelievable place to be. And they're talking about your story, and you're actively interviewing A-list screenwriters from Hollywood, having dinner with them, going to their Malibu beach house, and they're excited to meet you. It's an incredible feeling. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that makes it very humbling for me is that my Shadow Cell, I'm not the hero. I'm very vulnerable in Shadow Cell. When I write the book, I tell people about my mistakes and my errors. I'm able to finally acknowledge things that people never knew. As an example, I was not approved by CIA to be a case officer. they rejected me being a case officer. And a case officer is the stereotypical Jason Bourne, stereotypical James Bond. I was rejected from that for reasons that they subjectively decided I was not fitting for that. So when I actually served at CIA, I served predominantly as a mission planner. It was just in the context of this operation, in the context of Shadow Cell, there was one person who believed I had the skills to go out in the field, and they put their reputation at risk to ask me to go out in the field and actually do field operations. Had I screwed up, it would have fallen on them. Their reputation would have been ruined. Their career would have been ruined as well. But they took that leap of faith on me. That doesn't make me the hero here. That makes that son of a bitch the hero, right? And all the other people that were part of our cell doing incredible things that had never been done before at CIA. That's what I was so excited about with the book, was telling their story. And I was terrified to tell my story.
You know, I think what I hear and what makes a hero to me is not the person who has the skills of Jason Bourne or Daniel Craig in 007. It's somebody that's like, yeah, this was over my head and I had to figure it out and do my fucking best. And these are the mistakes I made. It's actually the vulnerability that makes a hero interesting. So, you know, to me, your story is far more interesting than, you know, that badass assassin who's just doing his job and this is what they do and it's the only way. But because all of us are a lot more like you than we are like Jason Bourne.
That's fair.
You know, and so we're entering a world where we're going to have to take whatever skills we have, whatever vulnerabilities we have, and we're going to have to be honest about them, share our mistakes, learn from our mistakes, you know, and that's going to be a hero for the people. You know, like I'm a regular fucking person, you know, and I had some training, you know, and also here's where I was vulnerable. Here's where I made mistakes. Like that's a hero to me.
That's super kind of you, man. And that makes me feel quite a lot better. I haven't heard anyone say that to me. I haven't heard anyone say it that eloquently for sure. Mm-hmm. So that means a lot coming from you.
Yeah. And same with your story about the dog. Like that's the most heroic story that you could share. Mm. It's the most heroic story because we all have this idea of who we want to be and how we want to be perceived, but it's way more badass. It's like way more badass to share who you actually are.
I appreciate that.
That's fucking cool, man.
And just as a shout out to the people in the book that don't get a voice for themselves, the men and women that are doing the operations in Shadow Cell, they're still doing those operations. CIA fought for 3 years to block publication for that book. That book was written in 2001. It was the first draft of the manuscript was done in 2021. And we presented it to CIA and they deemed the entire book a classified document. The premise, the title, all the details inside were deemed classified. And my wife and I knew that we had taken very, very intentional steps to make sure that what we shared was not classified information. Classified information has a very specific definition, right? It has to exist on a document that has a classification on it. We knew that what was in the book would not be tied to classified documents. It was our story. We lived it. We knew what was told in documentation and what we were sharing in the book. So it was a political move. It was an effort by the administration at the time that was in charge of CIA at the time to kind of squash and avoid any geopolitical tensions that would come from the book, which there will be plenty, right? Shadow Cell is a story of how my wife and I built a terrorist cell at CIA and about the men and women who joined that cell and executed operations against the largest adversary facing us today. And that is a sensitive story that CIA does not want exposed to the public. There was a mole that they never acknowledged. Mm-hmm. All of that is part of the story. So when they blocked publication, we were not necessarily surprised, but we didn't think it was legal. So for 3 years, and the reason it takes so long to coordinate anything with CIA is because they don't email you back the next day. You email them, and then they wait 3 months, and then they finally acknowledge that you emailed them. So you end up having to, it's just this one solid stream of communication where you're like, I sent you this email on this day. You legally owe us a response within 100 days. And then you remind them every 30 days. And then on day like 98, they send you their response and they're like, we have received your response and we are considering our response. And then they get another 100 fucking days, right? So that's how they bureaucratically blocked publication for as long as they could, until my wife, in her version of paternal instinct, my wife was like, we could sue them for First Amendment rights. We have a case on the First Amendment for why we should be able to publish this book.
Mm-hmm.
So she found a great attorney and talked to that attorney, and the attorney agreed. And then we sent a very nice formal legal letter to CIA saying, if you don't approve the book, then we're going to take you to court on a First Amendment lawsuit. And it didn't take 100 days for them to respond to that.
Yeah. And that's, when you're dealing with people who understand these kind of, it's all about leverage. It's all about, power, force, cost benefit analyses, et cetera. And you're dealing with people who are entrenched in that belief system, then, you have to engage in a way that they understand.
Yeah.
You have to actually show, okay, we are gathering force, and this force could have cost, and in this case it'd be financial cost. And, it just exemplifies that, again, that level of consciousness that we're operating from, where we need to operate from another level of consciousness. Like, how do we build this more beautiful world? How do we use our intelligence for the good? Not to win a battle against the bad, but to actually unify everybody towards a greater whole and a greater purpose. And I can only hope that, the people with the skills that CIA operators have, and like we said the last podcast, most of them are good people.
Yeah.
You're a good person, and I say good, meaning that your intent is good. Not that every single thing you've ever done or said is good. And in hindsight, you might not change, you wouldn't change a thing you said or did. That's not good. The intention of what's coming from you is good. And I think that's the intention of what's coming from most people is good, to disambiguate like intent from impact as well. Like, was your intention actually like a pure intention? And I think so many are in that pure intention. And if we can all start to believe that there's another story that can be told, another thing that can be fought for, maybe we'll make it out of this mess.
So I have to say this because, and I've been holding my tongue for however long we've been sitting here, right? I don't know if it's just you, or if it's your energy or your intention or whoever the architect was of this space, but there is truly something grounding about being here in a conversation with you. And if a piece of that comes across to the viewer, I can 100% see why they keep listening and watching what you have to share, because it really is stepping out of Austin and stepping into this space. It is a huge difference, man. And however you've done that, it's real.
Thank you, brother. That means a lot. It means a lot. Yeah.
Is it intentional? Is it just you? It's like,
deeper than intentional.
Holy smokes.
I appreciate that. It's deeper than intentional. It's that I know God is real. And I know God is love. And love is complex at the level of the divine. It's complex. It's a mystery. But I know God is love. And I know that I participate through this force that's beyond me, but I'm participating in this force. I know that to be true. I know it.
Then you are a conduit. You are a conduit, man.
And I think that's available. I'm not special. There's nothing special or ordained or, no, it's like I've chosen paths and bridges that have led me to a gnosis. It's so deep that you pull layer after layer after layer, and you'll just find more and more faith and more love and more truth about what I know to be real. And I may not always be able to explain it perfectly because it's ineffable, but I feel it. I feel it deep. And so is my intention to create that? No, but I guess in some way, at my best, it's just emergent, from the gnosis that I carry. And I think the message is that I'm not fucking special. This is available to everybody. Like, we have to democratize access to the divine gnosis. We don't have to listen to somebody with a funny hat to tell us what the mystery says to the person with the funny hat, and then the funny hat speaks in Latin or whatever fucking language, and then that gets translated to this person, then we hear it. No. Like, we all have access. Like, my teacher, Rebbe Gavney, says, like, God is the infinite intimate. Like, God cares about you. Like, you specifically. Loves you. Not just loves, but loves you. Like, wants to hear your story. Like, when you tell your story, like, God's like, tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me more, Andrew. Tell me more. And is patiently waiting for you to tell every little detail and to love you the whole way. And Christ as well. Like, Christ embodies that energy at the same time. And those, these forces. And I also understand the conflation between Christ and God, because Christ represents this access point, this kind of archetype of the pure love side of God. And so if you want to access that pure love side of God, the unconfusing aspect of that, like, Christ is beyond the confusion of the mystery. It's just like, I love you no matter what. Like, I love you beyond condition. I love you with no record of wrong. It's not that I forgive you. Forgive you means I recognize your transgression. It's like, I love you. And that's my gnosis of Christ, is that as well. And Christ participates, in the divine as that force. And that's just my own personal beliefs. And for some, that's heretical. And for me, it's just my gnosis. So if I'm a heretic, I'm a heretic. But it's what I've felt from Christ and what I know of God. And so to me, that's where all of this comes from. And then what I do, the conversations I have and how that, and I can get lost in my head, and I can, temporarily have amnesia, but underneath it all is a gnosis, and it's beyond belief.
It's real. It's real. It's inspiring, man. And thank you for letting me be part of it.
For sure, brother. It's great to see you again, man. More to come. All right, everybody, check out Shadow Cell. Book is fire. The story is incredible. And Everyday Spy, lots of cool shit, including that.
OpDev Plus.
OpDev Plus.
Yes, sir.
So cool, man. Appreciate you so much.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah. Love you guys. See you next week. Thanks for tuning into this video. Make sure you hit subscribe. Follow me at Aubrey Marcus. Check out the Aubrey Marcus podcast, available everywhere. And leave a comment. Let me know if this video resonated or what else you would like to hear from me in the future. Thank you so much.